Unless you've been living under a Faraday rock somewhere, you've probably already heard of No Man's Sky's downfall and epic comeback. For those in the know, this was done by giving people who already own the game access to 19 free DLCs to date. Adding cool things like base building, planetary volumetric clouds, player-ownable and flyable capital ships which can store your extra ships and gear, more varied planetary types with higher levels of detail and even more fauna to discover, and even an actual multiplayer experience which was absent from the first release, something that I was really upset about and why I turned my back on No Man's Sky for so long. All of these leading up to the most recent update from No Man's Sky, Frontiers, which in addition to adding new base building features to the game, gives players the opportunity to find, own, and manage their own settlements. This one in the background is actually one that I personally found and what I've been using to figure out how all of this works. So in this video, I'll share with you guys what I've found in the new Frontiers update, along with the general experience that I've had after so many years being absent from the game. So if you like this video by the end and you think I deserve it, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button before you leave. So after feeling a little bit burnt out with Star Citizen this past week, the game I mostly cover on this channel, I decided to check my game library to see if there was anything else I could check up on to see if there were any changes. And I came across No Man's Sky with a new update, Frontiers. And like many of the updates that I've seen in the past from No Man's Sky, I was about to dismiss it as something that I wasn't really too interested in, not enough to get me back in the game. But this one showed off a town that looked like it could be a part of the Outer Rim in the Star Wars universe, which I'm a huge fan of. So then I became determined to find my own settlement in No Man's Sky and make my own version of Mos Eisley. But I didn't want to do it alone, so I decided to grab a couple of friends from the Armco community and check out the game together. Now for this video, I'm going to assume many of you guys are new like me, or returning after a long time, so you may not know that there's a multiplayer feature in the game. The way it works, I discovered, is that if you want to play with friends, you can either join somebody's existing session or have them join yours by simply making your own session. However, you're going to want to make sure that you're all playing the same game mode if you want to play with the character you've been progressing with, as they've got 4 separate modes: normal, survival, permadeath, and creative to choose from, including Community Expedition, which is sort of its own thing where you can collect unique rewards for a short period of time. They're kind of like community-wide events run by Hello Games, the people who make No Man's Sky. Unlike in the first days though, you're always going to be playing in a universe where there's a possibility to encounter another player, although this is exceedingly rare. And unfortunately, or rather frustratingly, you can only have 3 other friends with you in a given session, though people can find you if they know where you are, so you can technically have more around you, just not in the same group. One of the cool things about the way this works is that as long as your friends have a ship and they've gone through the tutorial, when you go into a session with your friends, you'll all be in the same area as the host. So if you start the session on your planet, they'll all fly in and land on the planet that you're currently on. But like I said, if you don't have your tutorial done and you fly into a friend's session, you won't have your ship, so you'll be stuck on a planet. And unfortunately, players can't fly you in their own ship at the moment, which is also another frustrating part of the multiplayer experience in No Man's Sky. And that's probably partly due to the fact that, unlike Star Citizen, there are no spaceship interiors for your friends to jump into, aside from the capital ships, which work a bit differently. So in order for us to travel together to find the outpost I was looking for, I decided to call my capital ship into orbit and have everybody hop on board. So the way that capital ships work in No Man's Sky is that you can find them around the universe if you travel around. Eventually you run across a group of caps that are being attacked by pirates. If you save them, you'll be given the opportunity to take the helm of one of these ships for free. After that, you're going to have to pay for them with in-game credits to upgrade. And if you're lucky, you'll find one that looks like a Super Star Destroyer like mine. The cool thing about cap ships is they also double as a fantastic way to travel together with friends. As long as they land their ships within the vehicle bay before you take off and go on over to the next star system, they'll go along with you, making them act a bit more like aircraft carriers than maybe cargo ships. So with everybody finally on board, we were ready to head off on our journey to find that outpost for me to claim. And just so you know, when you first join the game with this new DLC, you'll be given a mission automatically to find a planetary outpost nearby, though it may not specifically be in the same star system that you're currently in. And so that means in Frontiers, these outposts are already pre-existing structures that you find in the universe. Very similar to the way that you find capital ships in the game. And that's my exotic ship, by the way. I found that earlier this week. Anyway, so just like the capital ships that are already in the game, if you don't like the first one that you find, which you probably won't because they're all generated, right? Then you can always reject it and head to another star system and hope to find another. Although this mission seems to stick to one place until you log on and off again in a different session. So you can either reject this settlement, which I think cancels the quest, or do what I did, which is to go to a completely different star system, log on and off, and then hope that it gives you another mission nearby to find a different outpost. Personally, I really wanted the Tatooine style, not the wooden style, so I was still on the search at this point during the week. Also, it is worth noting that if you do care about how much money you're making with this straight off the bat, that you can check the prosperity by going over to the obelisk in the center of the town square and checking its overview. These things will change as you manage your settlement, but right off the bat you may end up making more or making less depending on its initial settings. So back onto the capital ship with my friends, I went on over to the navigation console and selected the next star system where the mission icon was located. Unlike the little starships you fly around, the big capital ships can only be point and clicked for where they need to go, so it just is an animation and you appear in the next star system. Once we arrived, I was ready to set out on my own to find the outpost. This is another thing about No Man's Sky that I'm not super happy about when it comes to the multiplayer part of the game. At present, there's no way to share the same missions inside the base game with one another, so if you've got an outpost, only you can go and find it. And likewise, only you can end up owning it. There's no co-ownership, there's no guild ownership, there's nothing like that right now in No Man's Sky. But this is something that I really hope they end up adding at some point in the future, though I'm not going to hold out too much hope because it's already several years on, and if they've not added it at this point, it's probably something they may never add. Once you get into the star system where your settlement is located, you'll just have to locate it on the map by looking around until it shows up on your HUD. Also make sure that you've selected it in your logbook, and then you'll want to warp on over to it, or I think this is I don't know what this is called, but it's a thing where you go faster in space in No Man's Sky, and it's pretty neat. Altogether, I feel like the way that ships fly in No Man's Sky is pretty strange. It's a bit arcadey and a bit on rails, and by that I mean they fly a bit like space planes, like there's air resistance in space. They don't fly like you'd expect ships to fly in a Newtonian physics-based universe. But that's okay. Once you get used to it, it's still pretty fun, but it's definitely not the full 360-degree movement that you can get out of Star Citizen. But this settlement that I found next was the one that I wanted. This planet's not perfect, but it's got that desert-like feeling, that arid climate feeling that I really liked about Tatooine, and so I felt like this was my perfect Mos Morpha. Get it? Mos Morph? Because my name's, forget it. I know it's stupid, but that's the name. So once you get to the obelisk at the center of town and you're happy with what the current state of the city is, you'll be able to apply for the position of Overseer, which is essentially taking ownership of the settlement. Your next task, should you choose to accept it, will be to go and complete the Overseer's home. It's from here that you'll be able to begin managing the settlement. This initial part of the construction phase is rather quick, taking only a couple minutes per submission of materials to complete. Through using your scanner and scouting the general vicinity, you should be able to find everything you need right on the planet that you found the settlement on. But just in case you don't, you can always head up to the space station and buy what you need. A better way to do this maybe though is to have friends help you. All you have to do is stand next to a friend who's in your party and you can directly trade to them by selecting their inventory to transfer an item to. Though there's no way of rejecting these trades, so people can just shove stuff in your pockets. That's why I've got like 50 or maybe 100 meat packets from Lucian. So after feeding the dispensary to complete the office, you'll be able to go back and start making decisions and upgrading your settlement through the settlement console, which is inside of that structure. And one of your first tasks will be to decide whether or not to develop a bar or a marketplace. Now, I would recommend the marketplace because it's going to increase prosperity, but that's up to you. I'm in the red with this one, so I need to start improving its prosperity and productivity as soon as possible. As Overseer, you'll also be tasked with resolving disputes between settlers and greeting visitors who will either come bearing tidings of good or warning, like in this case, because the Vy'keen are just very, let's just say they come off as the Klingons of the universe. Unfortunately, the way that this works is that it's through this console, so you never actually see the settlers or visitors in front of you, which is a bit disappointing. It's kind of immersion breaking, and I hope that they add this feature into the world itself as opposed to this console alone. You can, however, interact with the settlers, which is kind of funny because sometimes they insult you if they're not happy with the status of the settlement. But beyond that, there's not much to it at the moment. I heard from the community that they're still adding some other features to this update later down the line, so it could be that in the future that they'll do more than just hurl gawk at you when they're upset. You'll also have to defend the settlement occasionally against the AI horde, the Sentinels, which, depending on your planet, may be more aggressive. You may also be curious if players can attack your settlement. Well, the answer to that is yes and no. Yes, they can attack, but why? So there's not really a reason right now to hold a settlement against other players, but maybe that'll be something in the future. Again, this is one of those things where, there's potential there, but whether or not No Man's Sky will do it is a big question mark. But if I had to guess, it probably would be a no, since No Man's Sky has never really been a PvP-centric game. But whatever the case is, it definitely seems like there are some missing features with this update, especially when you examine more closely what the upgrades actually do. After the several-hour construction period it took to complete the marketplace, there's really nothing inside of it or anything to do with it. None of the NPCs even interact with it, so it doesn't even look like a marketplace aside from its trappings. So then you might think, well, why don't I just build an outpost within my settlement? That way I can create my own custom buildings and make my own sort of thing. Unfortunately, this is the other part that feels really incomplete, because you can't actually build within your own settlement. As far as I can tell, these settlements are pretty much on rails. You get the opportunity to develop different parts of them at different times, but you can't actually modify them or trick them out visually in any way. And this is somewhat of a tragedy on what looks to be a really cool update, because all of the new blocks that they've added for building your own buildings are amazing. There are literally hundreds of them, and there's so many different ways to customize to really make the spaces that you construct you. Though I gotta say that the actual construction system is a bit cursed at times. It doesn't always place it where you think it should go, but I don't know. People were saying that this is something that is new to this update and that it wasn't quite this bad before. So hopefully they also fix this in an upcoming patch. So the No Man's Sky does have a lot going for it now. It's a far cry from where it was back in 2016. Lots more features are still coming online, and it does look like, looking at their track record, that they're going to get this update working even better coming in future patches. There are still some frustrating problems with the game, in my view though, like the multiplayer system being limited to only 3 of your friends. I'd like to see this be expanded a bit and even have some guilds or something so you could co-own buildings or fly together in a spaceship, for example. Or even heck, have your own settlement for your guild. That would be cool, because right now it feels like when you play with friends in No Man's Sky that you're playing together, but playing alone. But despite these shortcomings, I still found myself playing for way longer than I expected and past my bedtime over this weekend. So if you guys are interested and you want to check it out again, make sure you download the latest version. Otherwise, I think at the time of this video, it's also on sale on Steam for $30, so you have that too. But if you like this video and you want to see more No Man's Sky content, because there's a lot more to cover potentially if I were to make more videos, please let me know by hitting that like button and subscribing. See you next time.